Hello and welcome to no, this isn't the What's Buzzing podcast. This isn't the Backfield Buzz podcast. This is the Blue and White Buzz, a podcast solely focused on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Coty Wiles and Curwin Boutilier here for episode one. We're gonna be here throughout the entire season. Boots, brother, how are you doing? You excited? You fired up? We're here, new pod on the channel.
I'm so fired up for the Leaf season to get started. Can't believe that they're playing a prospect game or two of them actually this week against the Canadians. Hockey is right on the horizon. I'm pumped. The summer is good as far as weather, but it drains me as far as entertainment in the hockey department. And haven't been on a podcast in a while, but don't worry. For all you NHL general fans, the What's Buzzing podcast will be returning according to sources in the next few days. So some more NHL stuff will be coming to the Hive Podcast Network. But as far as the Leaf season, I'm super pumped for it to start. I'm super pumped to do this podcast with you. And I know we plan to bring on some of the other Hive Podcast Network members as some guests. That should be fun as well. And disclaimer, we're gonna try and not be as biased as we can, but and no promises is probably gonna slip through at times. But I'm super excited, Cody.
Our takes of what we say might be coming through some blue tinted glasses, but that's okay. That's okay.
That, that happens in Toronto sometimes, no?
I guess so. I guess so. Well, today's going to be a bit more of a roundup, I guess, so to speak, of what's been going on with the Leafs lately. We'll also be talking some prospects. The showdown, like you mentioned, Boots, is geez, in 4 days from now. So it
Yeah.
is right around the corner. And next episode, we'll be doing more of the season preview type of thing where we'll do a full off-season roundup. Maybe we'll give some line combos that we like, thoughts on Berube, more in general. But today's just, it's been a busy last couple of days,
Yeah, it
Boots.
has.
So let's start with I guess what's been an ongoing saga. I would say it's ended, but it really hasn't. There's a
Not really, no.
new wrinkle into the story with Nick Robertson, who signed a 1 year, $875,000 contract. And it's according to Frank Zaravali, despite the new contract, the belief is that Nick Robertson is still more likely to be traded than to open the season with the Leafs. So, what do you make of that?
It's very interesting. I'm very excited to see how this plays out because obviously it's no it's nothing new for the Leafs. They've been up against the cap heavy for the last couple of seasons, and yet again they are up against the cap very heavy with the Robertson signing. And if the Hockenpah deal also goes through, I believe it if the Hockenpah deal goes through for 1.5, 2 years, I believe is what his contract was, then the Leafs have like $333 in cap space or something like that. And they also have the professional tryout for Max Pacioretty. So they're very tight against the cap. And it wouldn't be a surprise to me whatsoever if they still move on from Nick Robertson. Because the thing is, Robertson was set on getting a change in scenery and pretty made it pretty public and vocal about it that he really didn't want to play in Toronto anymore. And that kind of sucks if you're a Leafs fan. You don't really want to hear that, especially with the skill set that Robertson has. But I think the signing very well could have been just for leverage for the Leafs because it's way easier to trade someone who you have signed for a year than to trade an RFA. So it could very well end up being a signing trade. I don't know if you have the same thoughts on it or if you think that maybe he'll just end up playing here anyway because there is opportunity here. No, there is.
Look at the left wing depth and tell
There's
me,
not.
is there a better opportunity for Nick Robertson to play with top end players in the league to get top 6 minutes
In San Jose, buddy. In San Jose, go get your minutes in San Jose if you want it that bad.
well, there's conflicting reports coming out because, like you just mentioned, Saravalli also saying like it's always easier to trade an asset under contract as opposed
Yeah.
to being an RFA. But then
Hmm.
Darren Drager is saying here's the quote from Darren Drager. Well played by the Leafs. Opportunity here for Robertson to stake a claim on the left side. He wanted out. Treliving explored the market while staying in touch with Nick throughout the process. New coach and a fresh start for Robertson. So Drager's almost making, just kind of reading on what he says is new coach, ready to get going. And I mean, I'm not sure that the Leafs just want to trade Robertson in general. I mean, Treliving explored it, didn't get anything he liked, so why would you give up on Robertson, who's still young, could still prove it, and it's a new coach, so if it's a complete open playground, honestly,
Yeah.
for when we do these line combos next episode,
Hmm.
we're just going off of when Sheldon Keefe was here and what he liked to do. Things could be
It's a whole
totally
new
different.
ball game, man.
It
It's a whole
really
new ball
is.
game.
Uh,
But yeah, like you mentioned, that's the biggest thing for me too. If Nick Robertson does stay, obviously the reasons behind him wanting out of Toronto was the lack of minutes he was getting, was the lack of opportunity, and was because of Sheldon Keefe and the way he coached him or deployed him and implemented him into the lineup. And like you said, Craig Berube is now in town, and he's made it public as well that there is opportunity. And he said personally to Nick Robertson, as far as reports go, that there's opportunity to play on this left side and play in the top six, maybe the middle six. And like you said, there's not really a team out there. There's maybe a few and far between that will give Robertson that opportunity if he wants to go play for a team that's probably going to miss the playoffs. Like I mentioned, San Jose, it's there, but it's a new coach, it's a new dynamic, so it could be if he stays a whole new opportunity for Nick Robertson. I don't see why the Leafs. I mean, if he really doesn't want to play here and you think you can get some assets for him, go ahead and make a trade, but I don't think you're going to get necessarily the value that Nick Robertson is truly worth at his core right now because he's dealt with injuries in the past few years. He hasn't necessarily got the minutes to prove what he can ultimately prove in the NHL. But last year was the first year we really seen Nick Robertson, and you could like definitively say, yeah, this guy's an every night NHL player. He's an every night guy. So that is at least something for Robertson. But you look at the pace he was on last year, I think he had 13 or 14 goals in just over 60 games. So he has the opportunity for the Leafs to be a 20, 25, and if you're pushing it, maybe a 30 goal scorer on this team if he plays on potentially the second line.
yeah, 14 goals in 56 games last year for
Yeah,
Robertson.
less
So
than 60.
you're really, if you give him 20 more games, like you're looking at maybe 25 goal scorer right there. So like that's some of the offensive juice that Leafs fans and I know we have been craving. Is just that the secondary scoring, and it was something Robertson provided last year.
He
And
did.
if he can get a little more run, then I don't see. I would really like him to stay personally. I hope he stays. I
Yeah,
hope he
I
wants
know
to.
you do.
I I just he's still young. I don't want to give up on him, especially if they've already tried to explore the trade market and you're not going to get anything back. I there's no point in just trading him to lose a trade and then you're out of the player when he's cheap, which is something the Leafs desperately need is cheap players who can make a big impact, and that's what Robertson
Cheap
can do.
roster players.
And it's a 1 year deal, so for Robertson, come in, play well. If you still want to leave after the season, or you want to go get paid somewhere else, you can. Or the Leafs will just throw a bag of money at you because you played well.
And and that's the thing. If he performs this year on this 1 year deal in Toronto, and Toronto doesn't have the cap space because, like I've mentioned several times already on this podcast, that's only 10, 20 minutes in so far that the Leafs don't have much cap space. And if he wants to go get paid somewhere else after this season, I'm sure he's going to put up the stats to at least make more than 8.75K. He's at least going to put up numbers that are 1.5 plus million numbers without a doubt.
So yeah, this the cap situation is very it's interesting because Max Pacioretty now coming in on a PTO this morning.
Yep.
It's been finalized, and it's interesting. So here's the quote from David Pagnotta. Sounding like the Maple Leafs and UFA left wing Max Pacioretty are moving towards a PTO, which is now official. If all goes well and Toronto creates cap space, which they are working on via trade, a 1 year contract should follow. As a
Mm-hmm.
follow up, I'm told, regardless of whether or not Toronto will make a separate trade, which again, they're working on a move, the expectation is Max Pacioretty and the Maple Leafs will come to terms on agreement for the season. So it's it's just a matter of Pacioretty is going to be a Leaf this season. He's that's what it's sounding like. They just need to create the cap space. So, like you mentioned, Boots, they got 400K open right now, basically. And if you do whatever with Timmins,
Do the math.
that's
Crunch the
1.1.
numbers.
It's there there there's a cap casualty is going to come. They're looking for trades. So
Hmm.
I got
Hmm.
some numbers, especially when you factor in the Yanni Hakanpää signing and what's going to be on with that. So I got six names here that could be potential cap casualties for the Leafs and who they're looking to trade. One of
So are we
them's
gonna?
oh, go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry. I was gonna say, are we gonna play a little game here? You're gonna say the name, and I'm gonna say yes or no.
If that's how you want to do it, or
I mean, let's
I would
just do
like
it
I would
just
love
for
to hear your
fun.
take on each player. Sure, maybe you could
As
go into
as
each
far as like
player.
trades, like trade them.
Well, they're trying to trade them. That's
All right,
that's
let's.
that's the report. All right. Well, first up is Connor Timmins. He's on a 1.1 for 1 year. It's
Yes,
could trade him, but like you could also send him
could bury
down.
him.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I would be open to either trading him or just playing him on the first pair in the Marlies to start the season at least. He's a great injury replacement guy, but at 1.1 million, he's not worth that. So he could certainly be a casualty to this whole cap situation.
Yeah, and especially with a weaker decor last season, Timmins
Hmm.
couldn't really crack the lineup. So we'll see what happens with him. It seems like the more obvious one to free up 1.1 mil.
Yeah.
Connor Dewar now 1.18 uh this season for 1 year. It's I will say the bottom six is almost a bit crowded to some degree with wingers. So is Dewar somebody that uh I mean 1.2 is nothing to slouch at for the Leafs right now. That would go a long way for them. So is Dewar worth like the Pacioretty coming in, getting rid of Dewar?
Oh, that's like you. That's tough. Like you said, it's almost more crowded than you think in the bottom six. It's funny because we need a top six, middle six left wing right now. We're in desperate need of it, and hopefully Pacioretty can kind of fulfill those shoes. But when you get to the bottom, you have a lot of names, especially once you get Pacioretty in that lineup, and it bumps people down. Like, where's McMahon gonna play on that left side? Like, Pontus Holmberg can play the wing or at center, and if you go Matthews, Domi, Tavares, Kampf down the middle, then Holmberg is 100% an option on the wing. So Dewar, it's a tough situation for Dewar because I think I want him on this team. I think he's a great player, a great fourth liner, a great forechecker. He does things right defensively. He does all the intangibles right, and it's a nice guy to have for that bottom six, specifically the fourth line. I think he's a great fourth line player. But for that money, he might be making a couple 100,000 too much. Like if the Leafs could have got him at like 900K, that would have been phenomenal. Save an extra over 200K on Dewar 2.8 or 280K. Sorry, I'm thinking in millions. God, if Dewar was a couple million, then we'd be really screwed on the cap. Um, but yeah, I think you want to keep Dewar, but he's definitely making too much. So if you want to maybe bury him in the Marley system for the start of the year, that's also a possibility, but I don't think that's as likely as like a Connor Timmins for sure.
I also wrote down Nick Robertson. Just like it's kind of, I mean, just with all the reports that, I mean, Sarah Volley saying he could still get traded. I mean, that's maybe that 875K is still freed up there regardless for
Yeah.
the Leafs, and they're just expecting to trade. So, I mean, I've already said that I want him here. I would love for him to stay. Do you have a preference?
Nick Robertson, I I really don't have a preference. I could see him being traded and I could be fine with it, but they need to get something back for him. They cannot be trading him for pennies. Like if they trade him for like a fifth round pick or a sixth round pick or just a late pick to free up the cap space and kind of just move on off from him because he doesn't want to be here. I mean, yeah, that him not wanting to be here doesn't give the Leafs a ton of leverage. It doesn't. He wants a trade. Teams know that. It's public. So that doesn't give the Leafs a ton of leverage in this, but he is now signed, which helps the Leafs in the sense of being able to deal him to a team. And he's still got upside. Like you said, there's still a lot to be unlocked with this player. There's still a lot of potential there. And the ceiling is still pretty high for Robertson, in my opinion. If you can figure out the kinks in his game, the defensive blemishes he has, the lack of physicality he sometimes has in the corners, forechecking, the areas of the ice he goes sometimes in the offensive zone are questionable. Sometimes the way or the routes that he will skate in the offensive zone. I was watching some breakdown by Frankie Corrado actually the other day, and some of the routes he takes in the offensive zone kind of kill the play. They kind of kill the offensive zone time that the Leafs have. And if he can just figure out these kinks in his game, there's still a lot to be discovered with Nick Robertson. So I'm not opposed to trading him to free up cap and get some assets, but the assets have to be like maybe a third round pick, maybe like not a great prospect, but a prospect that can maybe be an NHL player one day, maybe be in the bottom six for the Leafs. Like they need to get something if they're going to trade him.
Yeah, I guess getting like a third round pick wouldn't be the worst since the Leafs don't have their first, third, or fourth for the next draft, so
Yeah,
would help in that sense, but I just feel like he'd be selling low and he could still
100%.
provide some value for the Leafs. Okay, so where are we at with Ryan Reeves? 1.35 for the next 2 years. Is he just feels like somebody Berube would just love to have in the locker room, and the boys love him. Are we just, it would be lovely if he could be on a minimum and you could save the 600K or whatever it is, but seems like he's just gonna be on the roster as a 13th forward, drawn in and playing games this year.
I mean, yeah, that's what it seems like. There's nothing to indicate that's not the route that they're going with Ryan Reeves right now. And like you said, the 1.35 hurts. It hurts on the Leafs cap hit. He's a fourth line player. He's not going to play any higher than that all season long. He's not going to play anywhere higher than the fourth line. As simple as that. And he's not going to play every game. Like you said, he's going to be either a healthy scratch or maybe he'll get sent down from time to time. I know he did last year. So again, the 1.35 is that threshold for the variable contract in the minors. So that does help. That was kind of sneaky by Brad Treliving to have that as an option for the Leafs, but still, when he is on the roster and counting towards the NHL cap hit, it's too much. Again, like Dewar, if you could have got him for even a million, like a million, save 350,000, like these add up. You think about maybe you save 350,000 on Reeves, you save a couple 100,000 on Dewar. I can't like a David Kampf is another guy that I think the Leafs overpaid on. He's making 2.4, I believe. Actually,
Yes.
have it jotted down right here. Yeah, 2.4. You save maybe 400, even 400K. I think even more than that, but you even give David Kampf a 2 mil flat deal. These couple 100,000, they add up into another roster player, whether it be a Max Pacioretty, a Nick Robertson. It adds up over time to be that extra piece that you can implement into your roster. So Ryan Reeves, I don't think he's going anywhere. I don't think the Leafs will trade Ryan Reeves. I think he's just going to be a guy. He's going to play some games. He's not going to play some games, and he'll probably fluctuate between the majors and the minors. So
Yeah, I'm not sure anybody's trading for Ryan Reeves anyways, but it's good that you brought up. I love that Treliving and Pridham do
yeah,
the 1.35 variable. They signed Benoit to that for multiple years. They signed McMahon on that
McMahon,
deal with multiple years. So
great. As far
it's
as Benoit and McMahon, that's a great deal. But for
great
Ryan
deals.
Reeves, no.
Yes, but if all else fails, you can send them down to the minors, even though it doesn't really look like they plan to do that. They could if things happen. But these next two names, you kind of already mentioned one and David Camp. These next two would really create some space. These two I feel like are could be the cap casualties, and it's David
I
Camp
know who you're about to say, and I don't like
or
it.
it's Calle Yarncroke. So you've been a big
Who
Calle
was the first
Yarn
one you said?
David Camp. Camp is so Camp's making
Yes.
2.4 for 3 more years, and Yarncroke's making 2.1 for the next two. For anybody, I guess nobody would know. Off air, you've loved Calle Yarncroke. That's your guy. That's somebody that you would really like to continue on this Leafs roster. But similar to what we were talking about with Dewar a little bit, the bottom six is you can he's replaceable to me more than a David Camp is. Even though Camp is even though Camp is making more, his skill set is more needed just by playing center and being just more defensively responsible. Even though Yarncroke is, I don't want to take that away from him, but it's just like with if Robertson's coming back, if Patches is going to be here, Easton Cowan makes a push, who we will talk about later in the podcast.
Yeah.
I feel like you could replace what Calle Yarncroke has brought, and I feel like you could get more for Calle Yarncroke on the trade market as well. That's my case. That's my case. You defend your boy, but that's the case I've brought to. I think the Leafs should move on from Kelly Yarncroke.
The Camp versus Yarncroke trade debate. Honestly, that's a good point. You made some good points there. There's some very valid points, but I would keep Callie Yarncroke for a couple reasons. The one con going against my keep Callie Yarncroke campaign is the center depth. Once you get past Matthews, say the Leafs go with Domi at center, which I think they probably should at this point, because moving John Tavares down to 3C is would do wonders for the team. He's automatically probably a top three center in the NHL, or top three third line center. Sorry, definitely not a top three center. Maybe if you're talking Austin Matthews, but no, not Tavares. But yeah, after that, those three guys, the fourth line center role is pretty much set in stone to be David Kampf right now. And if you take away David Kampf, who is it going to be? Maybe Pontus Holmberg, maybe Yarncroke if you want to move into center. That's a thing. My slight, my slight like holding on to hope kind of thing with this whole deal is that Yarncroke can play center. Is he better at playing the center position than David Kampf? No, certainly not. He's not. Face-off's definitely not as good either. Sheldon Keefe had that ridiculous little game plan of starting David Kampf at the start of every overtime game because he can win that face-off, gosh darn, and get you the puck to start overtime. I hated that, by the way. Sorry, just had to bring that up. Starting David Kampf over Matthews in overtime, ridiculous. Anyways, David Kampf makes 300,000 more, and he's on the books for an extra year more. And Yarncroke can simply score at a better rate, assist wise, goal wise. He can produce more. He's more versatile in the lineup. David Kampf can only play fourth line center. Maybe you bump him up to third line center if you're feeling ambitious. Yarncroke, if you really want, if you get some injuries here, there, and everywhere, Yarncroke has and can play in the top six if need be. And that's something I love about Yarncroke. His versatility is kind of like the Swiss Army knife. He's similar to what Sheldon Keefe kind of did with Alex Kerfoot a couple years ago, as far as moving him up and down the lineup. And I just like I like the skill set with Yarncroke. He is a bit older than Kampf. That is another knock, I guess, on Yarncroke, but his shot is very deceptive and underrated. I think when you look at shots on the Maple Leafs roster right now, it probably like Matthews is number one in the world. And then you probably go Nylander. And then it's probably a two-way tie for third between Tavares and Yarncroke, in my opinion. So I like Yarncroke. I like what he brings. If you can get him at center and playing decent at center, I'd keep Yarncroke over Kemp. It's just my opinion, really.
In the shooting rankings, I think Naz has a wicked shot, so I think he deserves some love in that as well. But
He has a wicked shot, but I don't think it's better than Yarncroke's yet. Give
eh,
give it give it maybe by even the end of this season, it might be, but he's only played one full NHL season. I think he's got to develop that shot a bit more, and I think he'll be able to do so in the top six this year.
just yeah, Yarncroke is coming off a down year where was injured a lot. He only played 52 games, only had 21 points in those 52 games. One of the lower totals he's put up throughout his entire career.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, like you mentioned, he's getting older. He is 32. He's about to turn 33 actually, in like 14 days, couple weeks here. So we'll see. I feel like Yarncroke or Kemp would make the most sizable difference for the
Mm-hmm.
Leafs, but it just might end up being like a Timmins, a Dewar, a Reeves, but it's hard to see how because according to Drager too, after they have signed Robertson, their focus is by adding free agent forward Pacioretty and defenseman Yanni Hakanpää. So and Chris Johnston also expressed optimism on his podcast that we'd be seeing the defenseman Hakanpää at Leafs training camp. So it sounds
Yeah,
like
they're
Hakanpää,
optimistic about it.
and it's just I don't know where. Well, it's gonna be. I would be shocked if it wasn't one of these six guys that we've talked about that
Yeah.
would get moved. I'm not sure who else um would be off the roster. So
Do, do you want to hear my official like prediction? I'll just throw it out there.
yeah,
I
go
think they'll
ahead.
trade. I think they'll trade Robertson. I think especially for a Berube coach team, I don't know. He's expressed publicly that there's opportunity for Robertson here, but at the same time, if a player doesn't want to play for Toronto, I don't think Berube or the Leafs, at that matter, Treliving in the head office, Shanahan, I don't think they want him here. So I think Robertson's going to get moved. Hopefully, they get something for him. That's what I'm hoping. I think Robertson gets moved, and I think Timmins gets buried in the minors, and that generates the cap space that we need to fit Pacioretty, to fit Hawkenpaw if it goes that way. So that's my official prediction.
Yeah, that would be the cleanest move. Is that would free up if Patrick is going to come in on a minimum, which I would assume at this point, if he's coming on a PTO, we were
Maybe minimum,
talking,
maybe
we were t
100K over.
we were talking that he could make a bit more, but I mean,
Yeah,
how often do you see guys come on a PTO and then get more than
they
the minimum? I'm not
not
sure.
often.
So, yeah, Robertson and Timmins, do whatever you want with them cap wise.
Hmm.
That frees it up right there. So maybe
Also,
that's what they do.
sorry to cut you off, but we didn't mention either, which is something to keep an eye on as far as a fourth liner. Steven Lorentz is also on a PTO with the Leafs right now. So if he
That's
can
true.
impress at training camp, he also makes the cap crunch to like figure out the numbers. Like if the Leafs really want him as a fourth line piece or an injury replacement guy, it only makes things more complicated. So Lorentz is something to keep an eye on if you're a Leafs fan right now.
6'4", 215, shoots left, can play center.
That's
So
another thing.
maybe
Bye bye,
maybe
David Kampf.
maybe we'll see. We'll see. They have lots of options right now. It can go in very different ways.
Hmm.
Someone who also makes this very interesting is Easton Cowan. So maybe we'll transition into the prospect stuff here in a second. Before we do that,
Yeah.
actually, before we do that, I
Okay.
just it happened a bit earlier in the offseason. We didn't start the podcast yet, but Austin Matthews getting the captaincy. Just your quick thoughts on it. I know everybody has talked about it, but there it is. The
Yeah,
French should be
baby.
on it.
Us tone.
Yeah, you were calling for it a little bit off air. I didn't think it would happen this off season, but here it is. So just what do you think real quick?
I'm not going to sugarcoat this at all or drag this out. That doesn't need to be talked about that much. It was the right decision. The Leafs made it. Matthews has the C now. It's how it should have went. It's how it is. If you don't like it, complain about it. Matthews is the captain. He's the leader of this team. He's the best shooter in the world. That's how it is.
And yeah, I would assume Tavares would get the A. It hasn't been
Oh
announced
yeah.
officially or anything, but I would assume the A's would just be Tavares, Morgan Riley, and Mitch Marner, who also is having a little situation on his own. I mean, it's been talked ad nauseum at this point. Maybe we could comment on it quick here as well. Um,
Yeah.
Looks like, I mean, there's been nothing on the trade related front for Marner, so he's clearly just
No.
coming back. It honestly sounds like that they're working towards an extension with
Yeah.
Marner. So just, well, I mean, do you have anything you want to plant your flag in? Any outs like any crazy thoughts, any crazy takes here for episode one?
No crazy taste right now. It doesn't sound like they're going, like you said, it doesn't sound like they're going down the trade route. This isn't verbatim. This isn't quote of what Drager said, but in a nutshell, he said it seems like both teams are interested in getting a contract done at some point, but at this point, right now, that they're not necessarily close on getting it done. They're both sides are content to go into the season without a contract extension in place for Marner. So it sounds like it's just something that's going to get worked on between Marner's agent and Brad Treliving throughout this season. So unfortunately, Leafs fans in big markets don't necessarily like extension talks and extension rumors and news and whatever you want to call it looming throughout like the last season of a UFA's contract. But unfortunately, that's just how it's going to have to be. I think this year Marner's going to enter the season without an extension. The team and Marner's camp and agent are going to work on it throughout the season, and it sounds like, unfortunately, he's just going to make probably a couple million more than he did on his last contract, which kind of sucks. But when you look at his performance, yeah, in the playoffs it hasn't been good, but overall he's making 10-9 now. He's worth 12 million. Maybe they can get him on a discount. Nylander's making 11.5. Maybe they get him at 11.5. Um, but it's sounding like he's just going to get paid probably $12 million or something like that at the end of by the end of the season at least, or at the end of the season. I know Leafs fans will be ripping their hair out if we get down to the last couple of days of the re-sign phase and Marner's still not signed, but I don't know if that'll happen because there's no chance that I don't know. It's tough because I would say trade Neil or trade Marner, but I also don't want to trade him for not enough, similar to the Nick Robertson situation. And like worst case scenario, you lose him for nothing. And you can't do that. You cannot lose a player of Marner's caliber for nothing. And I think that's just where I'll leave that whole conversation. We just can't lose Marner for nothing because that'd be catastrophic, really.
For what it's worth, I think that it's the right call to kind of go into the season working on this extension, and we'll see when it gets done or what the number comes in at. I would assume he wants more than Nylander. I believe I saw that
Probably.
somewhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's gonna be playing out. I mean, it's just back-to-back years of the stars. I mean, it was Nylander and Matthews last year with all this extension stuff. Well, I guess it was Nylander throughout the season, and then Matthews more so as well. And now it's Marner this year. So um, we'll see. That's just how it rolls in Toronto.
Yeah, pretty much, man. We'll see how things turn out here, but you never know. Yeah, I'll be interested to see what the number is because sounding like the extension is going to be what happens. We'll see what the number is.
All right. Well, the last thing we'll touch on is the Prospect Showdown. The Leafs have 26 of their top guys to participate in the upcoming showcase in Montreal. It's basically if anybody knows the Traverse City tournament that's been going on these last couple of years with the Leafs, this is basically replacing that. So it's they'll face a team of the Habs prospects in 2 games this weekend at the Bell Center. Quickly, what do you think, Curwin, replacing this Traverse City tournament, and now we're just taking on the Habs twice, top prospects? It almost creates like a little rivalry thing even more. So with the young guys coming up, they're learning early.
Yeah, I mean, it's good. It's good for the game. It's good for the rivalry. Also good for the rivalry is Patrick Laine going to the Habs this season. So there's a lot of things making this rivalry between the Leafs and Habs even deeper, and you really didn't even have to make it any deeper. It goes back as far as time, if I'm concerned, really till the original six era. Um, the Traverse City was fun, and got a couple of teams involved. I believe it was Columbus, Dallas,
And
Toronto,
Detroit.
and Detroit. Yeah. So it kind of got a bit of different teams involved. So it was good in the sense that you're playing a bunch of different prospects from different kind of systems and kind of getting a feel for other teams' kind of systems and coaching. But as far as this goes, replacing it with this prospect showdown between the Leafs and the Habs, I think it's cool. I think it's a couple quick games for the prospects to get their feet moving, kind of get their toes wet, and why not do it against a rival team that's only a couple hours away? So I have no problems with it whatsoever.
Well, I'm excited because
I'm
it's the start of that Leafs season is here, and
Ooh.
I love the prospects, and one that we both have come to has come near and dear to our hearts, and honestly kind of ties into what we were talking about previously with all this
Mhm.
wing depth is Easton Cowan. So he will be attending. He kind of headlines the whole thing with Fraser Minton. Um Cowan, let's start it with what are your expectations, not just for the showdown, but for this season? Like, do you think right now that let's say Cowan has a good camp and he looks like he can belong on the Leafs, would you still send him down? Or if he shows that he's capable of playing in the middle six, third line, just being on the team wherever you want him, would you play him with the Leafs this year?
Oh, put me on the spot. This is tough, and it's not only tough for me to say. It's gonna be a tough call for the Leafs. Like really, I think it will be unless he's just not good and doesn't play well, which I don't foresee happening. He's our top guy, he's our top prospect, and rightfully so. What he did last year with the London Knights, league MVP, won the OHL championship, and almost got it done in the Memorial Cup as well. Lost in the finals against Saginaw, I believe. So they went deep, and Cowan had an unbelievable season. All the haters saying that Cowan was a horrible pick at 28 2 years ago by Kyle Dubas. They're wrong. They're wrong. I just hope they know that we traded with the Capitals that the trade deadline before that draft, and we turned Rasmus Sandin into Easton Cowan. Maybe that ends up not being as great as it sounds right now, but right now, I don't know about you, but that sounds phenomenal, does it not?
Yeah, it does. And it's, I think you're right. It's going to be an interesting, it's one of the main storylines of camp as well
Oh, for sure.
with everything else we've been talking about. And it just adds another wrinkle into this Robertson, Pacioretty, Hockenpah, this cap situation. But the Leafs assistant general manager, Haley Wickenheiser,
Yeah.
saying she thinks that he's going to make a push and that
Hmm.
but she also did mention it's always hard to make the jump from junior to the NHL, but he has proven everybody wrong at every level, so I don't put it past him. If he looks good to me, I would just play him. I don't see, I've said this to you
For the
before.
whole season, right?
If he's capable, I don't know what else he has to prove in junior, what more junior could offer him. He led the playoffs, the OHL playoffs in scoring, was the MVP,
Yep.
the best player on the best team almost in the entire CHL. If
I
he's
mean, all the tools are there, man. The transition to the NHL is the biggest jump for any kind of prospect. There's no doubt about that. He's very capable defensively and penalty kill wise in the OHL. It's going to be interesting to see if that translates smoothly, at least to the NHL. I think it will translate eventually for sure because it's just within his DNA and it's within his game. But to the level of competition of the NHL, will that translate right away? It's going to be tough to see, but we'll see, I guess, in the first 10 games of the regular season because I'm sure the Leafs will 100%. I'm 100% convinced that they'll give him what Fraser Minton got last year, the 10 games to start the season and kind of evaluate, see what they have in him, see if he's ready or not, see what kind of parts of his game he needs to tweak. So I'm pretty positive that Easton Cowan will get the first 10 games to start the year at least to kind of, like I mentioned earlier, kind of get his feet wet a bit in the NHL because he only played preseason games last year and not NHL games. So I'm sure they'll give him that. Do I think he stays the full 82? Not really, unless he really impresses. That's the thing. If Cowan really impresses in those first 10 games, it'll be tough to kind of send him back to the CHL at that point. You know what I mean? It's not necessarily that he's not ready for the NHL. It'll just be like he has shown way too much that we can't send him back at this point. So that's what it's gonna have to take for Cowan. I don't think necessarily the preseason factors into this decision too much because teams are playing their prospects, teams are playing different lines, they're kind of figuring things out. So I'm pretty positive the preseason won't factor in much to the decision of whether he'll play 82 games in the NHL this season. But the first 10 games of the regular season, I think, will be huge in that decision. And just want to point this out as well while we're talking about this. Funny enough, as we're recording this part of the podcast about the prospects, about the Prospects Showdown, I'm jumbling up my words now. Mark
Cowan's got you,
Masters,
he's got you flustered. He's got you
yeah,
flustered, Cowan.
Cowan's got
He's
me
got
all sorts of ways, but Mark Masters just tweeting now that Leafs rookie camp is underway as we speak, and Marley's coach John Gruden is overseeing all the stuff involving Leafs training camp or Leafs rookie camp. So it's gonna be interesting to see, man. This prospect showdown is going to be interesting. I got a couple guys I'm keeping my eye on. I know you do too. Back there on defense, I know you got one guy specifically at a Lethbridge that you are really liking. For me, Jacob Quillen. Leaf signed him towards the end of last year, and I'm interested to see what they can get out of him. He's back from my hometown, pretty much from Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, and he's put up pretty good numbers when you look at last year. He did get some games with the Marlies before the end of the season. He didn't do too well, to be honest with you. He only had 1 point in 7 games, but that was his first kind of stint in the AHL. But when you look at what he did with uh Quinnipiac in the NCAA, like
Excellent.
excellent. He was 46 uh points in 39 games last season, and then the year before, pretty much point per game at 38 and 41, and that's university. So we'll see what we have in him, but I'm excited to see if he can really actually show something, because a lot of players, they get to this point in their career and they kind of either they hit or they miss. And it's as simple as that. You catch fire and you run with it, or you miss and you never know if you'll ever get a chance again. So it's going to be interesting if he can grab this bull by the horns and really make something of it. I'm not expecting him to be a Leafs guy next year, but if he can be a top six Marlies guy and then maybe the year after push for a bottom six role on the Leafs, you never know.
Yeah. It'll be his first full season with the Marlies coming up. He can play up the middle. He can skate well. Doesn't take risks.
No.
So we'll see what Quillen. Somebody more up the middle that I'm interested to see is Fraser Minton. I would love to see in this prospect showdown Minton and Cowan really play together. Just it's probably the two best guys we have up front right now. It's going to be interesting for Minton because nobody's really talking about Minton possibly being on the Leafs this season. He was the one that was playing with the team last season and didn't necessarily have the best year with the Marlies in his first full year or sorry, he wasn't with the Marlies. He was down in the CHL again, but didn't have the best year. He took the captaincy down there and didn't really dominate the way like an Easton Cowan did.
No.
What do you think of Minton? Like, I mean, is there a way he plays games this year for the Leafs? Yeah, he will be playing with the Marlies this season. If he's not on the big roster.
Yeah, if he's not up with the NHL roster, he's which I don't think he will be. I don't think he will be playing games with the Leafs. And it's hard even with all this, like we mentioned earlier, it's kind of there's a crowd in the bottom six for the Leafs. There's a lot of names out there. That crowd might thin out with a potential trade, like we mentioned earlier, a David Kampf, a Calle Yarncroke kind of trade that could thin out a bit. But I, Fraser Minton might not even get to 10 games to start the season before going back to either the C or sorry to the Marlies. Oh wait, he's not even eligible, is he anymore? Because he is now.
He's aged out,
He's aged out. Yes, right. Sorry, that's my bad. He's
so
20 now.
he's just ready to.
He's just ready to take that step. Sorry, I got the ages mixed up between him and Cowan. So yeah, he I don't think he'll start the season with the Leafs. If injuries arise and a need is needed, then maybe he gets games. That's another thing to keep an eye on too. I say trade Kampf instead of a Calle Yarncroke. Maybe if he's ready, maybe if the Leafs think he's ready, maybe Minton can be a fourth line center. Maybe he can. I don't think he has the size or maybe necessarily the grit or like his defense is pretty good, but I don't know if it's like completely NHL fourth line kind of shutdown standard right now. But when you look at like what he did with the Blazers and the Blades, because he got traded during the CHL season last year, like 7 point or 10 points in 7 games with the Blades, and then he went to or sorry, the Blazers. He had 10 and 7. And then he went to the Blades and had 38 and 36. So he's well over point per game in the CHL. So that definitely won't translate to point per game in the NHL. Maybe around half a point per game in the NHL, something around that. And I don't think we'll necessarily get to see a full sample size this year because I don't think he's going to get more than like 20, 30 games per se, unless like I said, unless the Leafs think they're ready, that he's ready to crack their lineup and potentially be in the bottom six down the middle instead of like a Kampf or maybe even like a Doer.
I mean, it's crazy. They gave him the 4 games last year, and I was just kind of thinking at this point next year he would be with the Leafs, but it looks like he's gonna have to make another push in camp like he did last season. But yeah, in those 4 games they gave him, they didn't even use the full 9. They kind of realized, yeah, it's probably not going to happen. He looked pretty overwhelmed, which is fair. We're not trying to knock him on that. Any other, just a couple other forwards, I guess, could mention Ronnie Hervinen, is somebody that could make some noise. Had a bit of a season from hell, last season.
Yeah,
His father passed away before the season started. Then he
yeah,
suffered an eye injury, that, you know, it's that like there was that was a pretty big injury for him. He only ended up playing 37 games. So we'll see how Hervinin comes to be. Nikita Grabenkin is somebody that's
yeah,
also be getting talked pretty highly about. Um, had a great season in the KHL. He finished third among players aged 21 and under with 41 points in 67 games. 6'2", 190, straight line player, executes the puck pretty well. So we'll see. He's a bit of a different style guy that they have in the system. Wickenheiser saying he's shown he'll fight a couple times this year as well. He'll get into the tough areas. He's a bit of an atypical skilled Russian player in that he's has a real edge to him, which is something that is really unique. So somebody else to keep an eye on. Any other thoughts on the forward group here that they
on
announced?
on
We'll
the
have to put the
four.
graphic. We'll have to put the graphic up.
Yeah, 100%. We'll put the graphic up for sure. I kind of caught me off guard, even though I did know you were talking about forwards here. I started to move on and look through the defensemen, but
Okay, well, there's really nobody else crazy
I
of
mean,
note.
other than who we mentioned, Minton, the Cowan, Hervin, and hopefully he can improve and impress as well this year. Like you said, Wickenheiser talking pretty highly about him and a tough year for him last year. Rest in peace to his father. Terrible situation for him, especially as a young player. That's tough. Kind of stints your growth, stints your mind. That's the worst thing. It doesn't really stint your physical capabilities or your work ethic or whatever. It just really messes with your mind for a young player. So that must have been tough for Hervinen. But other than that, just looking down the list here, Ty Voigt, like I'm just throwing out names to maybe keep an eye on. Maybe they impress. Maybe they show something that you didn't really know they had. Ty Voigt, he's been in the system for a couple years now. If he could show a bit more than previous years, that would help.
Was really
Uh,
great in junior, and then
yeah,
didn't really have a year, a notable year with the Marlies last season. His first full
no,
uh pressure with them. I guess a couple other like the draft picks from this season. Sammy Q on the
yeah,
left side, and Miroslav Holinka will also be
Palinka for
there up
sure.
the middle. So that's a good roundup on the forwards. Let's move to the defensemen where
Brendan
they're
Lazowski is the last name I'll throw out for the forward
okay.
group.
All right,
That's
fair
that's the
enough.
last one.
All right, cool. There we go. Okay, so defenseman.
Defenseman. Uh,
Let's.
I'll
Who do
I'll
you want to
leave
start with?
you. I'll leave you with your guy. I'll leave you with your guy because
Okay.
I know you want to talk about him.
So,
I'm gonna mention two guys specifically on this defenseman list for the prospect showdown. I guess there's a third one that can be thrown out there, but that's Cade Weber. He's just a big guy, big body. He'd be nice to be a third line or a third pair guy if he can round out like his skating, round out all of the intangibles that he needs to take the jump to the NHL level. Obviously, acquired him from the Hurricanes at the trade deadline last year for a sixth round pick, I believe. So kind of change for maybe a potential upside in Cade Weber. But the two guys I really want to mention is Ben Danford, who could be the next Easton Cowan of the Maple Leafs prospect pool. People thought that they reached on him, thought that he shouldn't have gone that high, don't necessarily believe in his skill set or his potential. So this is a big opportunity for him to show, hey, I wasn't reached on. I am a legit guy and I am going to make it to the NHL and be a consistent NHLer. I'm a first round pick and I should have been. So Danford for sure is someone to watch out for. And another guy, we're starting to get to like not necessarily like Timothy Liljegren area, with this guy, but like it's starting to get to the point where it's like, have we waited too long for this guy to blossom into what we thought he could be? And that is Topi Niemela. We've had him in the system for years, playing with the Marlies now for I guess last year was his first actual year, or no, sorry, 2 years ago was his first actual year with the Marlies. But last year was his first full year with the Marlies,
Yeah.
is what I should
Yeah.
say, because he went 68 games, 39 points. He was pretty solid. I believe he was on the top pair for the Marlies, and he was a steady two-way guy. At first, we thought he was going to be just an offensive dynamo, very similar to like maybe like an Evan Bouchard or something like that with that offensive capability. But Niemela, I think, at least in his first full season with the Marlies, showed that he's not a defensive dynamo either, but he can play both sides of the puck and play it pretty well. He had a pretty solid year. He's +3, so he did what he had to do. So it'll be interesting to see if he can take a step up from there, though. That's the thing. He was decent last year, but decent isn't good enough. He needs to take another step up and um and show these fans that they shouldn't give up on his potential because it's there.
I mean, yeah, outside of Cowan, I'm not sure there's anybody else who's closer to the NHL than Niemela. I really like Niemela. He everything out of the Marlies last season was he wowed them, and he was really well, especially as the year went on.
Mm-hmm.
And
He got better.
Wickenheiser also saying they have a high belief that Niemela can make the jump. Yeah, a bit of a smaller guy, a bit more of an offensive minded guy. The way Toronto has kind of changed their decor around to be more bigger, more lengthy.
Yeah.
We'll
Cade
see
Weber.
if that's if Niemela's future is in Toronto, but I mean, for your first full season in the AHL, basically in North America, 39 points in 68 games is nothing to slouch at, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
not at all.
So I'm excited to see Niemela because I really do think he could play games with the Leafs this season if injuries happen and
Yeah.
whatnot happens. I really think he's a candidate to be called up. Like I would personally rather give him a shot over Connor Timmins if he's still here in the AHL.
Yeah,
So
I don't disagree whatsoever. I think the only really guys that would be ahead of him for a shot if the Leafs have injuries are Philippe Myers and maybe Dakota Mermis. Other than that, I wouldn't mind giving him a shot.
yeah, so like Niemela, somebody else that you've been teeing me up to say I love Noah Chadwick, man. I think he's I super solid for them. He had the A last year in Lethbridge, 56 points in 66 games, and that was an improvement on his draft year where he only had 20 in 67. He's getting the C for Lethbridge. Coming up to the season, I'm really excited to see what he could do. Just kind of one of my personal favorites. You kind of just get those guys. You just get your guys, and
Yeah. And
uh,
to build you can keep going on Chadwick here, but I just wanted to mention it kind of sparked in my mind after you mentioned he's getting the C in Lethbridge last year. Another thing to note about Fraser Minton to just quickly go back is he was the captain of the World Junior team last year. So for those coaches to kind of see that kind of leadership and that ability by Minton is at least encouraging. I will say that. But back to your Chadwick rant.
I mean, it's always. I mean, it doesn't hurt to see somebody has leadership qualities and is given a letter in general. So,
Hmm.
I I mean, what caught my eye is also looking into Chadwick a little bit. As a sixth round selection, he was given an ELC that that offseason,
Yeah,
which is a bit of a rarity um with these lower draft picks, but they gave it to him. He was given the keys as Lethbridge #1 defenseman last season, and he ran with it. He can break through the puck. He's 6'4", 201. Not sure if I mentioned that. Doesn't
big boy.
really doesn't play with a bunch of physicality right now, but he has the frame to put on muscle and to keep doing that. So another great year in the dub this year, and I would he could be ready for some possible game time. Going into this Prospect Showdown, there's the top four who I'd love to see like a Chadwick and Yemela play together. I think they
Hmm.
could pair nicely. And then yeah, you mentioned Cade Weber and Ben Danford. Maybe see what Danford looks like on the shutdown pair with somebody who plays similar to Weber. Weber's bit slower, needs to work on the skating. We'll see
Yes.
what Weber can do with the Marlies this season. Outside of that, not much defensively. They drafted Nathan Mays in the seventh round, who I guess we'll get to take a look at him, but the
Yeah.
rest of the guys are looking like Marlies, AHL contract kind of guys. Anything else on the skaters before we move to the goalies?
Skaters wise, and no, I don't think there's necessarily. Obviously, you keep an eye out for everyone. You want to see how everyone performs. You want to see who impresses, who unimpresses, who is a bit disappointing. You want to keep an eye out on everyone, really. But I think it's about time to move on to the goalies because I'm pretty excited about all three guys they have going to this showdown.
The Leafs goalie prospects are in a pretty good spot. Like,
Very underrated. The Leafs goaltending prospects are very underrated.
start us off here with the Hildebeest, Dennis Hildeby, who kind of headlines the next wave of Leafs goalies. What do you think of him?
Man, I love Dennis Hildeby. I think Joseph Woll and Dennis Hildeby are the future of our net. Obviously, Woll has already made that jump, and he's shown, especially in the playoffs last year against Boston, that he can be a stud goalie when healthy, and that's the problem. He needs to stay healthy, and I will be surprised. I'll say this: I'll be surprised if we get through this NHL season and he doesn't get injured at least once, maybe twice. But Dennis Hildeby, yeah, a lot of upside here, a lot of potential here, and he's a big body, 23 years old, from Sweden, and he's massive, man. He's 6'7", 223, and he is athletic as well. That's the thing. He's big, but he can move. Dennis Hildeby is kind of the best of both worlds when you look at a goaltending prospect. He's big and athletic, like I said. Last year with the Marlies, he had a good season. He 41 games, 913 save percentage in the playoffs. He only had 3 games, and it wasn't as good with an 896, but what can you do? It's a couple games, and the Marlies didn't necessarily play well in the playoffs against the Belleville Senators in the first round last year. So it's not necessarily something you look at. Those 3 playoff games are kind of an outlier, but a 913 in your first year in North America, you're competing with like the top 10, top 15 goalie prospects in the NHL, the top half for sure. When you look at the 32 teams in the NHL, I 100% can confidently say I believe he's in the top half, the top 15 is what he is in my eyes. Um, yeah, he put up a good stat line last year, along with that 913 save percentage at 2.41 goals against. He had time in the NHL but didn't play games. He just sat on the bench, which I don't know. It's something. He gets to talk to the guys, get a feel for the locker room, that kind of stuff. Just things that you want as a young player. You don't necessarily need to play the games to get experience. That's the thing. Some people don't necessarily view it that way, that you can be up with the big team, the big club, and not play either in the games or play a lot of minutes in the games, and you still gain stuff out of that. He was there for a couple games, I believe, as the Leafs battled through some goalie injuries. I think he was backing up Martin Jones at the time because Samsonov and Wall were out for a little period of time. But I I have nothing but good things to say about Dennis Hildeby, and I'm super excited. To be honest with you, there's a couple names I'm very excited to see in this prospect showdown. Cowan being up there, up the list. I think Dennis Hildeby is my most I'm most excited to see what he does in the 2 games. I'm assuming he probably won't play the full game or like both games. I'm assuming they'll probably split each game. I'm assuming Hildeby will maybe start both games, and then the other two will take over halfway through in each respective game, kind of thing. So I think Hildeby will get more work than the other two, but super excited to see what he's got.
Yeah, 4 shutouts, 21, 11, and 7 record last
Yeah,
season as well. And that's in his first full year, like you mentioned. So it's just gonna be a matter of continuing to progress for him. I don't think starts in the NHL are out of the question next year if an injury or two happens, which with
definitely
Joseph
not.
Wool is possible. Stolars has never had a big workload, so maybe he gets nicked up with
And our
something.
third goalie, can you trust him?
And Matt Murray has not been the most trustworthy to stay healthy lately as well. Yeah, maybe they're bringing 3 goalies, so they're also bringing Artur Akhtemov, I hope I said that right. Akhtiamov.
I always butcher that. I'm not gonna lie to you. I always butcher it. That's
I
why I
be-
didn't even attempt it when I was mentioning how they'll split games earlier. The other two guys. I know the other one's Pexa. I know that for
Yeah,
sure, but
Slava Peksa, the nickname Slava Peksa.
yeah.
Slava Peksa, who was with the Growlers last season, and Artur Akhtiamov, who I want to highlight really quickly because I didn't realize how good of a year this kid was having last season. A 921 save percentage in 17 KHL games as a young player is one thing, but the way he was shutting down shooters in the VHL, which is a step below the KHL. He won a championship there in the VHL, was playoff MVP with a 932 save percentage through 21 postseason games. My
Wow.
goodness.
Wow.
Uh,
That's crazy.
Athletic, uh, excellent. The thing is, he has an excellent glove. He makes some highlight reel saves. So if you're talking about this guy who, I mean, was amazing in the VHL, a 921 in 17 KHL games is also nothing to snuff at 22 years old. He's a bit smaller, 6'1", 170, fourth round pick by the Leafs in 2020. But I mean, he's somebody, I think he's above Slava Peksa right now, even though
Oh, for sure. I'm looking at Pex's numbers right now, and
Peksa
I
had
don't
a
know.
rough year last
He
season.
he with the Growlers last year, only 19 games and an 890 and a 3.71 goals against. Yeah, he didn't have the best season. But the year before that, 22-23, he didn't play any games in the KHL. He played 40 in the VHL with a 921, and he played two in the MHL with a 920. So I mean, those numbers are pretty decent, but in the which the competition isn't outstanding with the MHL and the VHL. So he's definitely third on the list between the Leafs goalies. Hildeby, and then God, I don't even want to attempt it. What
Akhtiamov.
Octiama, is that? Are we positive on that?
I mean I tried looking up a pronunciation guide. That's what I'm gathering. If it's
Act
wrong, I apologize very much.
Actiamov, maybe. Okay. As Leafs fans, we promise we will have this name figured out by next episode, whether or not we talk about him. But I think it's Aktiamov.
All right.
Anyway, Hildeby, Aktiamov, Pexa is a 1, 2, 3. Excited for all three of them, to be honest, but the top two for sure.
It'll be interesting to see what kind of workload they get. Like I don't know if just everybody each goal is going to get a period in each of the two games and then everybody
Maybe.
gets two periods. We'll see, but that I mean that pretty much rounds it up. There's
I would like to see Hildeby get a bit more work than the other two.
I yeah, for sure, but it's also at the same time like I almost want to see Akhtiamov get a lot of work in overseas here in North America and see what he looks like against this competition because we've kind of seen what Hildeby looks like, but he also is next up. So it's a bit of an interesting, what do you do with the
Yeah.
goaltending? But I mean, we've covered a lot today. This is gonna be a bit of a longer episode. I'm not
Yeah.
sure if they'll all be this long. So if you're still here
No.
watching, I mean, we appreciate it very much for the debut episode.
Respect.
Anything else, Boots? I mean, you can tell we're excited. It's right around the corner. So, uh,
I'm I'm super excited. I think the excitement between the both of us is what made this episode go longer than an hour. Yeah, super excited. Last thing I think we did want to touch on between the both of us. I think we'll just do a quick like yes or no is Mark Giordano and his opportunity of maybe returning to the Leafs. So for you, yes or no?
I mean, like, yeah, I would love Gio to come back, but I just don't see where. I mean, it could happen. Like you would love him to be like a locker room, bedroom type of guy, but they just have no space. And I think the depth on defense is pretty solid with, like you've mentioned, Dakota Mermis, Philippe Myers is there. I mean, Marshall Rafai is somebody that I like as well. I mean, Cade Weber, Mikko Kokkonen, who's also somebody who was getting some
Yeah.
reviews from Sheldon Keefe last training camp. So I don't know where I think. I mean it's not looking like he's going to retire. There's multiple teams interested in him. So
Sabres, Oilers, Calgary was reportedly at first, but apparently they're out now. So there's a couple teams. But for me, I'd say no. I just don't think there's room for him here. Uh, and even then, so I love Giordano. I love what he brought to the Leafs last few seasons. The leadership. He would be physical. He would drop the gloves several times. We've seen Giordano step up for a teammate, drop the gloves, do what he had to do, and that's what I loved about Giordano. But unfortunately, I think he's just running out of gas, and I don't think there's enough gas for a full NHL season left. I think we have too many guys waiting in the shadows, like a Topi Niemela, like a Philippe Myers, Dakota Mermis, Timmins if he's still around, Marshall Rafai they just brought back. There's just too many guys to either give a shot to or just give more minutes to that the veteran presence, the locker room presence would be nice from Giordano, but I think the time has ran its course for Giordano in Toronto. I think maybe go to the Sabres, get third pair minutes. I think he could. I think he could get third pair minutes in Buffalo. And I'd much rather see him try and do that than stay here. I will say the only downside is he's not going to win a championship in Buffalo. Nobody is. But Gio, I just don't think there's room for him here.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're both on the same wavelength there. And Buffalo could probably use a vet like him. That'd be great for Rasmus Dahlin, and Power, and everybody
Oh
else they
yeah,
got in the back end there.
yeah,
But yeah, I think you see what's a championship, right? Maybe Edmonton. I think Edmonton has a bit more leeway in their decor and how they're looking, but Toronto just has a little too much depth. Treliving's done a pretty good job at building it up since he's gotten here.
yeah.
So, but yeah, that'll do it. End it with a Mark Giordano. Why not?
Gio,
For episode one. Well, thanks for watching. Not sure how often these are going to come out throughout the season. We're working through the schedule. But if you want to see general NHL stuff, check out the channel. What's buzzing with Boots, Justin McLean, and Noah Simon. Maybe an appearance or two from some other guests as well. NFL season is fully in the swing here as well. So if you want to check out some National Football League stuff, I got you covered at the Backfield Buzz with Andrew Foster and Logan Glover. But that's it from us, Boots. Any final words you want to say?
any final words I want to say?
I
Um,
know I go Leafs go. Nothing
Craig Berube is going to do wonders for this team, and I think we are going to win the division. I think we're going to win the Atlantic Division. I should have kept that for our season preview. It's going to be in our season preview. Sneak peek. Leafs are winning the Atlantic Division.
Yeah, episode two, that's when we'll do the full offseason roundup, talk about more of the players on the team, what we expect,
Line
because
combos.
it's right there, baby. It's right
Mm,
there. All
mm.
right. Well, thank you for watching. If you liked the video, give it a like. If you really liked it, maybe subscribe. It would help us very much to help us grow the sucker. All right. Take care and keep it buzzing.